Ladies and gentlemen, there is a question that has perplexed philosophers, theologians, and humanity for centuries: what happens after death? It's a topic many avoid, yet it's one we all must face. Death does not discriminate. It visits the wealthy and the poor, the powerful and the powerless. So tonight, let us confront this universal reality with clarity, purpose, and hope. The universal appointment with death is one that every human being must face. It does not discriminate based on status, wealth, or power. Death is the great equalizer, treating kings and peasants alike with the same certainty. Whether you live in a palace or a hut, whether you command armies or serve tables, the reality of death comes to us all. This truth, as uncomfortable as it may seem, holds a profound significance that transcends the boundaries of culture, race, or belief. It reminds us that life is temporary, and our time here is but a brief moment in the grand story of existence. We spend so much of our lives trying to build something permanent, acquiring possessions, securing titles, chasing ambitions, yet death comes to remind us that nothing in this world is truly ours. Every crown will be removed, every accolade forgotten, every treasure left behind. The mighty will fall as surely as the lowly will rise, and all will face the same transition from this life to the next. Death levels the playing field, exposing the futility of placing our identity in things that are destined to fade. It compels us to confront an often neglected question: what truly matters? The inevitability of death invites us to reflect on the purpose of life. If all roads lead to this final moment, then life itself must be more than just accumulating wealth or achieving recognition. It must be about something greater, something eternal. Death forces us to evaluate our priorities. It challenges us to ask whether we are living for the temporary or for the lasting. Are we pouring our time and energy into pursuits that will die with us, or are we investing in something that will outlive us? This is not a question of despair, but of perspective. When we understand that death is inevitable, we begin to see life through a different lens. Each day becomes more precious. Each decision carries more weight. Knowing that our time is finite compels us to live with intention, to make choices that align with values that endure beyond the grave. Life is no longer about how much we can accumulate, but about how much we can contribute. The brevity of life is not a curse, it is a call to action. It reminds us that the impact we make is not measured by the years we live, but by the legacy we leave behind. The greatest leaders, thinkers, and visionaries throughout history understood this. They lived not for themselves, but for the generations to come. They invested their lives in ideas, principles, and actions that would continue to inspire and influence long after they were gone. Death, in this sense, is not merely an end, but a transition. It is not the cessation of existence, but a passage to something greater. For those who understand this truth, death is not an enemy to be feared, but a reality to be embraced. It is the door that leads from the temporary to the eternal. This perspective transforms the way we live. It shifts our focus from self-preservation to self-giving, from building empires to building legacies, from chasing success to pursuing significance. The reality of death also challenges us to consider our relationship with eternity. If death is a transition, then what lies beyond it? This question has occupied the minds of philosophers, theologians, and everyday people for centuries. While the answers may vary, one thing is certain: the decisions we make in this life have a profound impact on what awaits us in the next. This is why it is so important to live with an eternal perspective. When we understand that this life is not the end, but a preparation for what is to come, we begin to live differently. We make choices that are not just good for today, but that will stand the test of eternity. This understanding also brings clarity to the meaning of faith. Faith is not a passive belief in something unseen, it is an active trust in something eternal. It is the assurance that life is not a random sequence of events, but a purposeful journey with an ultimate destination. Faith gives us the courage to face death without fear, because it assures us that death is not the final word. It is merely a chapter in a much larger story. Yet for many, the thought of death remains unsettling. This is often because we are unprepared. Just as we prepare for a career, a family, or retirement, so too must we prepare for the inevitability of death. Preparation does not mean dwelling morbidly on the end, it means living wisely in the present. It means aligning our lives with principles that transcend the here and now. It means building relationships, cultivating character, and living with integrity. It means asking ourselves not just what am I doing, but why am I doing it? When we live with this kind of preparation, death loses its sting. It no longer holds power over us because we are ready for what lies beyond. We do not fear it because we understand its purpose. It is not a thief that takes from us, but a bridge that carries us into the next phase of existence. This perspective allows us to live boldly, to love deeply, and to give generously. It frees us from the chains of fear and fills us with the hope of eternity. The inevitability of death is a reality that no one can escape, but it is also an invitation to live fully. It reminds us that life is a gift, a precious opportunity to create, to contribute, and to connect. It challenges us to rise above the temporary and to live for what truly matters. It calls us to leave a legacy that will endure and to prepare for a future that is greater than anything we can imagine. When we embrace this truth, death is no longer an end to be feared, but a transition to be embraced. Death for many is seen as the end, a final, irreversible conclusion to all that we know. Yet the truth is far more profound. Death is not the end, but a doorway, a transition from one realm to another. It is the passage from the temporary to the eternal, from the visible to the invisible, from the finite to the infinite. And while it is a journey we must all make, it is also a reality that shapes how we live today. What we believe about what happens after death has a powerful impact on how we live in the present. If we view death as the end, as the final curtain, then it's easy to fall into the trap of living only for ourselves, seeking pleasure, comfort, and success with no regard for anything beyond the grave. But if we truly understand that death is not the end, but a doorway to eternity, it transforms everything about our lives. Our actions, our priorities, our relationships, and our values take on new significance. To truly grasp this reality, we must first recognize that our existence on earth is not an accident. We were not created to live for a few fleeting years and then fade into nothingness. We were created with purpose, with meaning, and for eternity. The life we live on earth is merely the beginning of a much greater journey. When we see this life in light of eternity, we realize that every decision, every relationship, and every action has eternal consequences. We are not simply living for the here and now, we are living for something far greater, something beyond the grave. This understanding of life beyond the grave gives us a different perspective on death itself. It no longer appears as something to be feared or avoided, but as a natural part of the cycle of existence, a transition into a reality that is far more enduring than anything we experience here on earth. The Apostle Paul writes, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain for Paul." Death was not an end to be feared, but an opportunity to enter into a deeper, more complete existence. He understood that the temporary struggles and hardships of this life were nothing compared to the eternal glory that awaited him on the other side. This truth has profound implications for how we live today. When we understand that we are not living for the temporary but for the eternal, it changes the way we approach everything. Our relationships, our careers, our ambitions, none of these things are inherently wrong, but they must be viewed through the lens of eternity. Are we living in a way that reflects the values of the eternal world we are headed toward? Are we seeking to build things that will last, or are we caught up in pursuits that will ultimately fade away? One of the greatest lies we can believe is that this life is all there is, that once our time on earth is over, it's all over. But the reality is that we are eternal beings. Our souls will continue to exist long after our physical bodies have returned to dust. The decisions we make today will echo into eternity. This truth should not fill us with anxiety or fear, but with hope and purpose. When we realize that death is not the end, but a doorway to a greater reality, it frees us to live more fully and more boldly. We no longer have to be driven by the fear of death or the desire for approval in this life. Instead, we can live for the things that truly matter. We are called to live in such a way that the legacy we leave behind is one that transcends time. Our actions, our words, our choices, these are the seeds that will bear fruit in eternity. Jesus told his followers, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. The treasures of this earth are fleeting, but the treasures of eternity cannot be taken away." When we live with an eternal perspective, we begin to invest in things that have eternal value, things that will matter long after we are gone. Living with an understanding of life beyond the grave also brings clarity to our mission on earth. As long as we are here, we are called to make a difference. We are called to serve, to love, and to share the message of hope and redemption with others. The eternal life that awaits us is not a passive existence, it is an active, purposeful life. It is a life of service, of making the world around us better, of leaving a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. The knowledge that death is not the end, but a doorway to eternity, gives us the courage to face the challenges of life with confidence. It enables us to live with joy in the face of suffering, peace in the midst of chaos, and hope in the face of loss. When we know that what we do in this life has eternal consequences, we approach life with a sense of purpose and urgency. We do not waste time on things that do not matter. We focus on those things that will have a lasting impact. In the end, the reality of life beyond the grave is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. It gives us hope in the face of death and power in the face of adversity. It reminds us that this life is not all there is, and that the best is yet to come. The way we live today is a reflection of what we believe about eternity. If we live with eternity in mind, we will live lives that are full, meaningful, and purposeful. We will leave behind a legacy that will echo throughout eternity. Death may be the end of this earthly life, but it is the beginning of an eternal journey, a journey that begins with the choices we make today. As human beings, we are often conditioned to measure our success by what we accumulate: wealth, status, possessions, and accolades. The world around us constantly tells us that success is about how much we can amass during our time here. Yet, if we pause and reflect on the deeper meaning of life, we realize that true success is not found in what we gather, but in what we leave behind. Our purpose in life and the legacy we build will outlast anything we can accumulate in this world. The reality is that life is fleeting. Time moves swiftly, and no amount of material wealth can prevent the inevitable passage of time. At the end of our journey, it will not be the possessions we accumulated or the titles we held that define us. It will be the impact we had on the lives of others, the difference we made in the world, and the legacy we leave behind. The question we must ask ourselves is, what kind of legacy am I building? Legacy is not simply about the tangible things we leave behind. It's about the values, the principles, and the influence we impart to those around us. It's about the way we shape the lives of our children, our communities, and the generations that follow. A legacy is built on what we give, not what we take. It is the mark we leave on the world through our actions, our choices, and our character. The most lasting legacies are those that are built on purpose. Purpose gives us direction and meaning, guiding our actions and shaping the way we live. Without purpose, life becomes a series of aimless pursuits, chasing after things that are ultimately unfulfilling. But when we align our lives with a higher purpose, one that transcends personal gain and focuses on serving others and contributing to the greater good, we begin to build a legacy that will last beyond our time on earth. Our purpose should not be limited to our careers or personal success. It should be about making a difference in the lives of others. The true measure of a person's life is not the wealth they accumulate or the achievements they collect, but the lives they touch and the difference they make. The greatest leaders, those who have had a lasting impact on the world, were not motivated by the desire to amass personal wealth or fame. They were driven by a sense of purpose, a desire to serve others, to uplift the broken, and to make the world a better place. A legacy is built through relationships. The impact we have on the people around us is far more significant than anything we can acquire. The way we love, the way we lead, the way we serve, these are the things that leave a lasting imprint on the lives of others. When we build relationships based on love, integrity, and compassion, we create a ripple effect that extends far beyond our immediate circle. We influence the lives of those around us, and in turn, they influence others, continuing the cycle of impact long after we are gone. A true legacy is also one that reflects our character. What kind of person are you becoming? Are you cultivating kindness, humility, and integrity in your life? The legacy we leave behind is not just about the things we accomplish, it is about the person we become in the process. People will remember us not just for what we did, but for who we were. The character we build today will be the legacy we leave tomorrow. One of the most powerful aspects of legacy is its ability to outlast us. What we leave behind will continue to influence the world long after we have passed. A life lived with purpose, with a heart for others, and with a commitment to building something greater than oneself will echo through the generations. The seeds we plant today will bear fruit long into the future. This is the beauty of legacy. It is not limited by time. It is something that transcends the boundaries of our earthly lives and continues to shape the world after we are gone. This is why it is so important to live with intentionality. The choices we make today shape the legacy we leave tomorrow. Every action, every word, every decision has the potential to leave an imprint on the world. We must ask ourselves, am I living in a way that reflects my purpose? Am I building a legacy that will impact others for generations to come? The answer to this question lies in how we live today. Are we living for personal gain, or are we living to serve, to give, and to make a difference? The measure of a person's life is not found in what they accumulate, but in what they contribute. What will your legacy be? Will it be one of personal achievement, or will it be one of service, love, and impact? The legacy we leave behind is not determined by the wealth we acquire or the accolades we receive, but by the lives we touch, the values we impart, and the difference we make in the world. True success is not about how much we can take from the world, but how much we can give. It is about the difference we make in the lives of others, the love we spread, and the positive influence we have on the world around us. Our legacy is not something we can take with us, but it is something we can give to others. It is the gift we leave behind, the mark we leave on the world. What kind of legacy are you building today? Are you living for something greater than yourself? Are you building a legacy that will impact the world for generations to come? The answers to these questions will determine the kind of legacy you leave behind. Life on earth, no matter how long or short, is fleeting. In the grand scheme of eternity, the years we spend here are but a blink. Yet, the decisions we make during this brief period have profound and lasting consequences. While the physical world we inhabit is temporary and transient, the choices we make here determine our eternal destination. Understanding this truth brings a perspective that transcends the immediate and anchors us in the eternal. Every day we are faced with decisions. Some seem small and inconsequential, while others feel monumental. However, when we adopt an eternal perspective, we realize that every choice, no matter how insignificant it may seem, holds eternal significance. We are not just living for the present moment, we are living for a future that extends beyond the boundaries of this world. The way we live today directly impacts where we will spend eternity. Eternity is not merely an abstract concept, it is a reality that awaits each of us. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we are all heading toward a destination that is beyond this life. The decisions we make, what we value, whom we serve, and how we treat others are the determinants of that destination. This is why it is so important to live with the awareness that this life is a temporary preparation for the eternity that follows. Our actions, choices, and attitudes on earth are the seeds that will bear fruit in eternity. An eternal perspective changes the way we view the challenges of life. When we are focused solely on the here and now, It is easy to become overwhelmed by the trials and hardships we face. Life can seem unfair, and the struggles we endure can feel insurmountable. But when we view our circumstances through the lens of eternity, we see that the difficulties of this life are but temporary. The Apostle Paul speaks of this in his letter to the Corinthians, saying, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all in light of eternity." The struggles of today are insignificant compared to the glory that awaits us. An eternal perspective also changes how we handle success and achievement. If we measure our lives only by the standards of the world, wealth, power, fame, we risk living a life that is disconnected from its true purpose. The things that the world values are temporary, they will not last. But when we view our lives through the lens of eternity, we understand that the things that truly matter, love, integrity, service, character, are the things that will last forever. These are the qualities that build an eternal legacy, not the fleeting rewards of earthly success. The decisions we make today also have eternal ramifications in how we interact with others. We are called to love our neighbors, to forgive those who wrong us, and to serve those in need. These actions are not just good deeds, they are investments in eternity. Jesus taught that whatever we do for the least of these, we do for Him. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every selfless gesture is an investment in our eternal future. The way we treat others is a reflection of our understanding of eternity and our commitment to living in alignment with God's will. Perhaps one of the most important aspects of an eternal perspective is that it frees us from the fear of death. For those who live only for the present, death is the ultimate fear of final end to everything we know. But when we understand that life on earth is but a moment and that our true life is eternal, death loses its power. It is not the end, but the beginning of a new and glorious chapter. Death becomes the doorway to eternal life, the ultimate transition into the fullness of existence. This understanding empowers us to live boldly and fearlessly, knowing that our lives are in the hands of a loving and eternal God. Living with an eternal perspective also gives us the ability to endure. Life's difficulties, disappointments, and challenges can wear us down. But when we focus on the eternal rewards that await, we gain the strength to persevere. The book of Hebrews reminds us to fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. When we keep our eyes fixed on eternity, the struggles of this world lose their grip on us. We begin to see beyond the temporary setbacks and focus on the eternal rewards that are promised to those who remain faithful. Eternity is not something to fear, but something to anticipate. The decisions we make in this life are not meaningless, they are shaping our eternal future. The relationships we build, the values we uphold, the service we give, and the love we share, all contributing to a life that extends far beyond the confines of this earth. This understanding gives us purpose and direction, knowing that every action, every choice, and every word has eternal weight. The eternal perspective also calls us to live with urgency. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. The choices we make today are the ones that will echo through eternity. Life is too short to live without purpose. It is too precious to waste on trivial pursuits. When we understand that this life is but a preparation for eternity, we begin to live with intention. We start making decisions that align with our true purpose, focusing on what will last rather than what will fade. The world often encourages us to live for the moment, to chase after the pleasures of today without thinking about tomorrow. But the eternal perspective calls us to live with a sense of responsibility and accountability. The life we live now has lasting consequences, not just for us, but for the generations that follow. The way we live today will impact our eternity and the eternity of those we influence. Life on earth is temporary, but the decisions we make here determine our eternal destination. The way we live today reflects what we believe about eternity. Are we living for the fleeting pleasures of this world? Or are we living with an eternal perspective, investing in things that will last forever? The choices we make, the values we uphold, and the relationships we build will all shape our eternal future. Understanding this truth should inspire us to live with purpose, to love with abandon, and to serve with humility. It should motivate us to live in such a way that our lives reflect the eternal reality that awaits us. Preparing for death is not a morbid thought or something to be feared. In fact, it is a wise and necessary aspect of living a meaningful life. Far too often, death is seen as something distant and uncomfortable to think about, something to be pushed out of our minds until it's too late. But true wisdom is found in the understanding that our time on earth is limited, and therefore we should prepare ourselves for the inevitable transition. Preparing for death is, in reality, about aligning our lives with divine principles, ensuring that we live with purpose, integrity, and a sense of eternal accountability. The wisdom of preparing for death lies in the recognition that this life is not all there is. As we prepare for the end of our earthly journey, we are reminded that we are not living for the moment alone, but for eternity. The decisions we make today, the choices we make in our character, relationships, and priorities will have lasting consequences. By preparing ourselves spiritually and mentally, we align our lives with divine principles, ensuring that we are living according to the purpose for which we were created. Preparation for death starts with the understanding that we are accountable to something greater than ourselves. The divine principles that guide us are not just rules to follow, but a framework for living a life that is aligned with God's will. Faith in these principles anchors us and gives us the strength to face life's challenges, knowing that our actions have eternal significance. When we live with the awareness that our choices have eternal consequences, we begin to make decisions that honor God and reflect His will for our lives. This preparation is not only about spiritual readiness, but also about the practical aspects of life. While it's true that we cannot control the timing of our departure from this world, we can ensure that we are living wisely, responsibly, and with integrity. This includes making wise decisions about our finances, relationships, and responsibilities. Are we living in such a way that we leave behind a legacy that honors our values and principles? Are we prepared to pass on wisdom and guidance to those who will remain after us? Preparing for death means living intentionally and making decisions that reflect the values we hold dear. Faith also plays a crucial role in this preparation. It is faith that gives us the hope and assurance that life does not end with death, but continues in eternity. This belief changes the way we approach death. We no longer fear it, but see it as the natural transition into a new phase of life. Faith helps us face the unknown with confidence, knowing that we are in God's hands. It allows us to trust that, though we may not understand everything, the divine purpose behind our lives and death is far greater than we can comprehend. Through faith, we find peace in the midst of uncertainty and strength in the face of life's inevitable end. Preparation for death also means living with a sense of urgency. Our time on earth is limited, and there is much work to be done. The divine principles we follow are not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of those around us. We are called to live lives of service, to care for the poor, to love our neighbors, and to share the message of hope with others. Every day is an opportunity to invest in eternity through our actions, our words, and our influence. The way we live today determines how we will be remembered and the impact we will have on future generations. Living in alignment with divine principles means making the most of every opportunity, knowing that our time here is short and our mission is urgent. In this context, preparing for death is an act of wisdom. It requires us to live with the awareness that this life is temporary, but our impact is eternal. It requires us to examine our priorities and ensure that we are living according to the values that reflect God's purpose for our lives. It also means looking beyond our own interests and desires and focusing on serving others and building a legacy that will outlast us. By aligning our lives with divine principles, we live with a sense of peace and confidence, knowing that we are prepared not just for death, but for eternity. One of the greatest aspects of this preparation is the peace it brings. When we align our lives with divine principles and prepare ourselves for the inevitable, we no longer live in fear or denial. We understand that death is not something to be feared, but a part of God's plan. We find comfort in knowing that Though we cannot predict when our time will come, we have lived according to the values that matter most. We can face death with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that we have made the most of our time and lived with purpose. In addition, preparing for death means living without regret. So often, people reach the end of their lives and realize they have spent their time on things that don't really matter, chasing after fleeting pleasures, accumulating possessions, or pursuing personal ambition. But when we align our lives with divine principles, we begin to focus on what truly matters: love, faith, service, and the building of relationships that endure. We no longer look back with sorrow or regret, but forward with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that we have lived a life worth living. Ultimately, preparing for death is not about focusing on the end, but on the way we live today. It is about living in such a way that reflects the divine purpose we were created for. It is about making decisions that honor God and align with His will for our lives. It is about living with faith, knowing that our lives are in His hands and that our ultimate destination is in His care. Through faith and preparation, we can face death with peace and confidence, knowing that we have lived a life that is pleasing to God and that our eternal destination is secure. The fear of death is one of the most powerful forces that can grip the human heart. It has the ability to paralyze, distort our thinking, and distract us from living fully. Death, in its inevitability, has often been viewed as the greatest enemy, something to avoid at all costs, something to fear, something that signals the end of everything we know. But when we understand the true purpose of death and our hope in eternity, we realize that the fear of death is not only unnecessary, but it is also defeated. Death loses its power over us when we grasp the eternal reality that lies beyond it. Death, in its essence, is not a defeat but a transition. It is not an end but a new beginning. This understanding is rooted in the truth that life on earth is temporary, and death serves as the doorway into eternal life. The fear that often accompanies death stems from not understanding this purpose. People are fearful because they view death as the final chapter, the end of all things. However, for those who embrace the hope of eternity, death is no longer something to be feared. It becomes a part of the divine plan and essential transition from the limitations of earthly existence to the fullness of eternal life. Victory over death begins with the recognition that death was never meant to have the final word. The Apostle Paul speaks of this victory in 1 Corinthians 15:54-55. Where he declares death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? These words reflect the profound truth that death, while a physical reality, has lost its power over those who have hope in eternal life. The sting of death, the fear and uncertainty, is removed when we understand that death is not the end of the story but merely a transition into something greater. The fear of death is often rooted in the unknown. We fear what we cannot control or predict. But when we place our trust in the promises of God, the unknown becomes known. Through faith, we gain assurance that death is not the end, but a passage to eternal life with God. This knowledge removes the uncertainty and anxiety that often accompany thoughts of death. We are given the strength to face it with courage and peace, knowing that our future is secure in God's hands. Furthermore, the victory over death is found in the resurrection. For those who believe, death does not have the last word because Jesus Christ conquered death through His resurrection. His victory over death assures us that we too will rise again. The fear of death is defeated when we place our faith in the power of the resurrection. Just as Christ rose from the dead, so will we. The resurrection guarantees that death is not a permanent separation, but rather a temporary pause until we are reunited with our Creator. When we understand the purpose of death and our hope in eternity, we begin to live differently. Death no longer holds us in fear or keeps us bound in the prison of uncertainty. Instead, it propels us to live with purpose, knowing that our time on earth is limited, but that our future is eternal. We no longer see life as a race to accumulate wealth or possessions, but as an opportunity to live according to divine principles, to love deeply, and to serve others selflessly. The fear of death is replaced with a boldness and clarity of purpose that leads us to live each day to its fullest, knowing that death is not an end, but a transition into something far greater. This victory over death also frees us from the chains of self-preservation. When we live with the fear of death, we often live in a way that is dominated by self-interest, always seeking to protect our own comfort, safety, and well-being. But when we understand that death is not something to fear, we are free to live with courage and to take bold steps of faith. We can serve others without hesitation, love sacrificially, and take risks for the sake of the greater good, because we know that our lives are secure in the eternal perspective. The victory over death allows us to live freely without the constant weight of fear holding us back. The victory over death also calls us to live with hope. In the face of trials, losses, and suffering, the believer is reminded that death is not the end of the story. In fact, it is in the face of death that the hope of eternity shines the brightest. No matter how difficult life may be, no matter how overwhelming the challenges, we have the assurance that this is not all there is. There is a greater eternal reality waiting for us. This hope anchors us in the storms of life and gives us the strength to press on, knowing that death is not the end, but the beginning of eternal glory. The victory over death also empowers us to live without regret. When we understand that death is not the end, we are able to live with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that our lives have eternal significance. The fear of death often causes us to live in a state of fear, regret, or unfulfilled potential. We may hesitate to take risks, speak the truth, or pursue our true calling because of the uncertainty of what lies ahead. But when we live with the victory over death in mind, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that our lives are in God's hands and that everything we do has eternal value. In conclusion, the fear of death is defeated when we understand its true purpose and our hope in eternity. Death is no longer an enemy to be feared, but a transition into eternal life. When we embrace the victory of the resurrection and the promises of God, we live with a new sense of purpose, courage, and peace. The uncertainty of death is replaced with the assurance of eternal life, and the fear that once held us captive is replaced with the freedom to live boldly. Understanding that death is not the end, but the doorway to eternity transforms the way we live, enabling us to live without fear and with a deep sense of hope and purpose. In conclusion, death is not to be feared, but understood. It is a natural part of the divine order, a transition, not an end. When we understand the true purpose of death, when we grasp the eternal hope that awaits us, we are no longer held captive by the fear of the unknown. Death becomes a doorway, a passage to something greater, something far beyond what we can imagine. Our time on this earth is brief, but our legacy, our purpose, and our eternal destination are forever. The way we live today shapes the eternity that awaits us. It is not the accumulation of wealth, power, or earthly accolades that matters most. It is how we align our lives with divine principles, how we love, how we serve, and how we live with purpose. Our choices matter. Our actions matter. The life we live is preparing us for the eternal life that is to come. Victory over death is found in understanding that we are not slaves to fear, but heirs to eternity. We are called to live boldly, to live with an eternal perspective, and to prepare ourselves not just for the end of life, but for the fullness of life beyond. It is when we embrace this truth, when we live with faith, hope, and confidence in the promises of eternity, that we truly live not in fear, but in victory. And so, my friends, do not let the fear of death govern you. Let your faith in eternal life free you to live with purpose and passion. Let the hope of eternity ignite a fire in your soul to live a life that transcends the temporal, a life that is built on divine principles, a life that leaves a lasting legacy. For when you understand that death is but a passage and eternity is your destination, you will live not in fear, but in the fullness of life's true purpose. The victory is yours, and it begins today.